Welcome, everyone, to a very special cross-posted episode of Giant Size Violence and Transcending Comics. In honor of Free Comic Book Day, my partner Eri and I are both going to be doing a quick informal roundup of the books we picked out today, as well as what we're going to be reading going forward. So joining me, as mentioned earlier, is my fashion consultant, roommate, and romantic partner, Eri. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Oh, you always build me up. Oh, thank you.
And I'm excited to say that, surprisingly, the books I picked out, while this wasn't my intention, I do think they fall within the realm of both my comic podcasts, so I'll be posting this to both feeds, and if you listen on one, you'll no obligation to listen to it on the other. But we're just going to go kind of back and forth, Eri and I, going between the books we both picked out. Thankfully, we were picking out separate books specifically on our route to the shop today, but I think we both got things we were really excited about and fairly satisfied with some big surprises in there.
Mm-hmm.
Eri, do you want to give us the list of the books you picked out today?
Yeah. The first one I've got here is Monster High. I don't know why I'm showing it to the camera since this is
some
audio.
of this might wind up in TikTok clips, so...
Oh, cool. So I picked Monster High as one of my free comics because I wouldn't say a big fan of the show, but I'm a fan of the show. It's the perfect show if you're cleaning to have on as background noise. You just kind of enjoy all the little monster puns that happen in there.
Yeah, and I know friend of the show, Tilly Bridges from Tilly's Trans Tuesdays, has actually written for the Monster High series, so I've always had an eye for that show. I've loved what they did with the dolls, and I'm just really glad that I grew up in a time where monsters were very much like the boys thing, whereas princesses and dress-up dolls were more for girls. I love that they've found a way to mix those two up, or at least reintroduce the classic monsters for a way that appeals to younger girls and boys too. But yeah, Monster High is a lot of fun. I really wish I could have grown up with it, but it came a little after my time as well.
Yeah, I certainly did not grow up with it. I was in my 30s when I discovered Monster High. But yeah, it's really cute. And you're right. I love the dolls. Just the fact that there's Barbie-sized monster girls whose fashion choices I really enjoy is super awesome. I secretly want to get some of the dolls. But yeah, and it's probably so I would say it was the one that bowled me over the least. So where I was going to okay. So it's got about 3 or 4 pages of story, which is a really cute little story about Frankie Stein. Then it's got bios, which I did enjoy. And then it's got this is actually really cute, Monster High new Scaremester schedule. So it's their little semester schedule. And it's got cute little punny monster classes that they're taking. So I do like that. And then they've got an interview with Jock Rai, I believe you pronounce her name, but they are a writer on Monster High. So that's really cool and interesting. And I enjoyed that. And then it has about 8 pages of ads. So that's why I'm going to put it kind of at the bottom of my list but I still very much enjoyed it. And the little monsters are really cute.
Yeah, and that's really pretty common for Free Comic Book Day issues, at least the prominence of ads. Since, these are being given out for free. A lot of studios, and especially small studios, will put these out just so people are aware of what they have on offer. Usually it'll be small anthologies though in those cases. But I did look through your Monster High book, and what I did like was that the character bios all had a full body diagram of each of the characters. Mm-hmm. And I liked knowing my younger self and how I like to trace my comics or draw the characters in them. I think this will be really good to give girls something they can easily go off of if they want to draw these characters. But otherwise, yeah, I'd be pretty disappointed if I was a little Monster High fan and I got 4 pages of comic. Some of the in-universe stuff the schedule is cool, but yeah, I think that maybe there should have been a little more comic content in a Free Comic Book Day issue.
I will say it kind of matches the mood of the media or of the franchise because really, they don't even have a series for it. It's just the little Netflix movies that they have. And the story is never the thing. It's always the designs of the monsters, what they're wearing, and just all the monster puns. So it's never really been about the story. It's always been about the little everything else and the style of it. They're almost kind of like Bratz dolls or something. So I get it, but at the same time, I was a little disappointed. But yeah.
Now, similar to you with free comic issues that were based on cartoons, I picked up Gatchaman issue 0 for Free Comic Day. This is a little anthology of 3 different short comics featuring the Gatchaman characters, which a lot of people in the US will know this series as Battle of the Planets or G-Force, or if you're a fan of obscure 90s media, you might know it as Eagle Riders, from when Saban had the right to reanimate this. So I really don't know much about these characters or this world, but I know it's kind of adjacent to Tokusatsu. It has that same, like, superheroes or superhero ninjas in this case with super vehicles that come together in a big jet. And, like, while I think Power Rangers is a weird, unique franchise with its strange history, like, really, there's no shortage of shows like Gatchaman that have a crazy history of, like, being localized several different times, having a weird release options. Like this, I know Voltron has kind of a similar history. Robotech, good God.
I love Robotech.
This was really my first time, like, ever trying out anything Gatchaman related. So this one has shorts written by Cullen Bunn and drawn by Chris Batista for the first one. And I know they're going to be carrying on and writing a Gatchaman series proper going forward, as well as minis from Tommy Lee Edwards and Daniel Hansen and Steve Orlando and Kath Lobo. Honestly, I really liked the self-contained shorts that were done by Steve Orlando and Tommy Lee Edwards. Just not really knowing anything about this world, them having a little self-contained thing that shows me a little bit about the characters or their villains is sort of what I'm looking for, and I think what a lot of fans of this are going to be excited about. Just, like, I like to think of when I first got Power Rangers comics in 2016 and how pumped I was that we'd get these little side stories about obscure characters or expanding the world. And I know how little people have been given that were, like, fans of this back in the day. So, like, while I didn't quite know everything enough to appreciate this, and it might not be my thing enough to, like, get it on my pull list, I really hope that some Gatchaman fans are excited. And plus, it's got a little bit of a Power Rangers connection since Cullen Bunn is writing this, and he is also writing the Godzilla Power Rangers crossover comics. So I think this will be
so cool.
Yeah. Gosh, I've seen the previews of the sequel series they're doing, and that Godzilla wears the Dragon Zord as a hat, and I am so excited to talk about that on the show someday.
I'm so excited to see that. That sounds adorable.
Overall, though, I'd say, like, if you're a fan of Gatchaman, definitely pick this up. Like, create some incentive for them to keep making, like, comic content for it. If you're like me, though, and had never heard of it, this will be a good place to dip your toes in, but definitely not, like, a must grab by any means if there's other books you got your eye on. What about you, Eri? What's your next book?
My next one is Asterix, as in Obelix and Asterix. So these are actually, rather than being a new thing, because that's what I thought it was. I thought they were kind of doing a new run of Asterix. And then I saw the original artists on there, Goscinny and Uderzo, and sorry if I'm pronouncing those wrong, and then I realized a lot of it's just kind of collections of pages from the classic 60s and 70s, mostly, or 50s, 60s, and 70s into the 80s Asterix comics. And I really loved it. From here on, I kind of loved all the ones I got, but nothing new. A lot of these I'd kind of read, but they were really hard for me to find as a kid because they had done, like, an animation of it when I was a kid, and I saw that on TV and really fell in love with them. And my poor parents had to find these French comic books translated for me, and they're great. They're, and as you would expect, they are from the 50s and 60s and French. So, but you might be surprised how wholesome and innocent they are. There was only kind of one thing that I saw that was like, oh, okay, yep, that was a different time.
Yeah, I saw they had the little Disney Plus, like, there might be some outdated depictions in this book, or them trying to say, it might be kind of racist in, like, the most gentle terms possible.
Yeah, there was, like, one one thing I saw and I was like, yeah. But at the same time, it's history. These things were published, people read it. And Asterix is a really interesting comic book because it is about the Gauls. So the original French people when the Romans are taking over. And so there's Asterix in them. They have druids and all that stuff, all the Gaul stuff. And they're always fighting with the Romans, and the Romans are trying to take over, which is just really fun. It's a really clever idea for a comic book and very classic. Think like the Donald Duck comics, just like really silly dad humor with a little bit of historical splash to them.
Mm-hmm. For my next book, I picked out Ultra Duck from Arcana Comics or Arcana Studios. And I really wasn't sure what to expect when I got this. It was like, is this going to be like a Darkwing Duck crossover or tie-in? But I'm pretty sure that's like a comic publisher I'd actually heard of before that was doing that. But I thought this was actually really fun and a surprisingly meaty first issue for this little world of Ultra Duck. While it is, yes, another superhero duck, and there's no shortage of those out there with Darkwing Duck and Duck Dodgers and the Mighty Ducks cartoon, this, I was surprised, very much feels like a duck version of Radiant Black, or like Radiant Black for kids. That it's like sort of the same situation of like a very everyday millennial or Zoomer coded hero that finds some kind of alien technology that some forces, like some cosmic forces, may be coming after. They don't really understand it, but like the hero takes a lot of selfies and seems to be caught up in the clout. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but he has some really great powers. But what I really liked was not that much of the book is actually focused on Ultra Duck himself. A lot of it is this little side story about this one girl that I think is friends with him, works at some kind of club bar situation, who then like uses her stage prowess and like some technical skills with her and her sound and lights person, and they fend off like some thugs trying to extort the studio by dressing up in a similar outfit and like using lights and a taser to make it seem like they also have duck powers. And like it felt like just watching a couple episodes of an Ultra Duck cartoon. And sure enough, I found out afterwards that this whole studio putting this out is mostly known as an animation studio. They did like the Steam Engines of Oz, as well as the Howard Lovecraft movies, and some others like the Clockwork Girl, some other Oz related things, and then a number of children's books and other like young comics that kind of tie in with their animation. So I guess this is really more of like a film studio that's trying to promote an upcoming Ultra Duck movie. And I'm not sure like I'll be the target audience for Ultra Duck, but I will certainly like check out some trailers and see if it garners enough interest. Cause yeah, this was a surprisingly good modern version of like the duck superhero thing. It wasn't just cashing in on old tropes. Like I felt like this was written by someone who's well versed in modern comics and taking a page from things other than just what we see from Marvel and DC and all the classic tropes from that, like something like Duck Dodgers and Darkwing Duck might do.
I definitely have to check that out. I have to admit that's the one of yours that you grabbed that I had like my eye on of like, okay, that looks really cool. And I might even be that target audience with my Monster High book over here. But when I looked at it, my first thought was Howard the Duck, because I'm a huge Howard the Duck fan, and it looked like sci-fi Howard the Duck or something, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eri, what's your next book?
So my next one is very similar to the last one. It is an edition of Mad Magazine. That's the superhero edition. So same thing of Asterix, of it's like a lot of older, just a collection of their older stuff. Like there are some segments in here from like the 70s and stuff. But yeah, they're all Mad Magazine cartoons about superheroes. And honestly, flipping through this one, and it was so nostalgic because I was such a Mad Magazine kid. Like, oh, every issue I was obsessed. But I will say, flipping through it, it's probably aged worse than the Asterix comics I was reading, which is highly surprising. And like, I even ran into some, you might want to call it transphobic stuff in there. But good going, Mad Magazine. But still very nostalgic, very, dad humor, very silly. And honestly, like, the Asterix I got, I never really laugh out loud because it's just silly dad humor or whatever. With the Mad Magazine, I have to admit, there were some jokes in there that literally made me LOL. So it's Mad Magazine. You get what you expect, but classic, great.
Yeah, like
except for the transphobic stuff.
I probably won't read that one since I'm not much of a Mad Magazine person, but I will say that, yeah, like the cover gag is even pretty great of the Superman accidentally ripping his superhero outfit, forgets that he's already in uniform before changing into Superman.
He's like, crap, I'm already in costume, and his bare chest is hanging out. Yeah, it even got a laugh out of you, so.
Like, I know comedy often ages like milk, but I have to say I'm surprised that in all the years of Mad Magazine, like when they're tailoring specifically for the free comic book day, presumably like all ages or most ages comic, they still weren't able to find like at least a single issue worth of non-problematic comics from their history.
Yeah, even Asterix did it. Like, even the 1950s French thing was able to do it pretty well, but Mad Magazine was just like, nope.
Now, for my next book, I think this is probably my favorite of the free comic book day issues that I picked up today, and that's the Energon Universe comic, or the 2024 special. Now, I've got a pull list for both Void Rivals, which is kind of the kickoff series that started this crossover G.I. Joe Transformers universe, and I also have a pull for Transformers, but I'm a little behind. Like, I do a lot of reading for both of my podcasts, so I really can only keep up with like one or two series at a time. And sadly, Transformers and Void Rivals, I'm both just letting get like a season or two worth of stories before I catch up. But this was awesome. Like, this really made me want to dive back into those and get caught up, because all three of the series they sampled, between Transformers, Void Rivals, and G.I. Joe in this, all knockout stories that, like, I can tell how well they're playing with these existing characters. Like, they're not trying to reinvent the wheel or like reintroduce you to these like Autobots and Cobra and G.I. Joe, or just like, we're going to tell the story our way. Like, it is retelling like the Transformers origin in a way, but in a very different way that's still true to the origin, but seeing like, what would it actually be like if these Autobots woke up in modern times after crashing here years ago? Like, how would the local populace actually deal with this? Or like, hey, there's been robots scattered across the planet. Like, what's happened to those over the years? And also seeing that like there's a bigger galaxy of aliens that interact with Autobots and Decepticons. And like, I know that Robert Kirkman, the person behind Skybound that's making these, like, Transformers, the movie, was a huge inspiration for him. And like, honestly, that's one of my favorite movies. And you can see that in this. There's deep nods to characters introduced in that, like Hot Rod and the Quintessence. And yeah, like, I just am really excited to read everything. Like, I'm probably going to pick up the G.I. Joe graphic novels now because of this book. And I was previously letting that be the one I pass on, but now I need to read it now because I loved the G.I. Joe story here too.
The G.I. Joe fan that you live with is very happy about that as well. So. And when you were done with it, you just handed it to me and were like, you have to read this because there is some awesome G.I. Joe surprises in there. I'm not going to give it away, but yeah, super cool.
Yeah, well, like, I will say, I know you're a fan of Baroness, and the story is kind of focused around her. And like, yeah, this got me on board. Like, I want to read more Baroness. And like, you've actually done a great job getting me into G.I. Joe comics this year. Like, I know I got you some for your birthday, and you had me read them because I can't believe how wild those books are. Like, we got around issues 49 and 50. And in the first issue I read, they kill Clifford the big red dog as a puppy. Like, they're evacuating some Cobra town of sleeper agents, and some family's like, we gotta leave the dog behind. And they're pulling out a gun. And the dog is like, it's the living image of like puppy Clifford the big red dog for no reason.
The Cobra town is amazing. Yeah. It is this town that is taken over by Cobra, and there's little kids in it and families, and they're just all like in legion with Cobra, and it's just this little Cobra town, and it is great. There's so many, especially in those Cobra town issues. It's so wild. Like, there's so many wild things.
Yeah, and when we actually got a chance, surprisingly, this year to meet Larry Hama, the writer of those comics, at a local convention going on. And I had no idea the legend that was Larry Hama, also known as the Korean doctor from MASH, and that he wrote like 300 and counting some G.I. Joe issues. He's even doing some of the modern ones, to my knowledge. And yeah, he just stuck through it. And a lot of that is gold. Like, from my understanding, it's like around issues 20 to 100, 150 are amazing. And like, yeah, I've only read 2 or 3 issues so far, and I'm hooked. Like, hooked enough that I thought about doing a little side podcast miniseries of 2 trans girls read G.I. Joe, because it's that fun, that crazy. And I did have Larry Hama sign that Clifford the Big Red Dog page, and he looked at me weird, but it was absolutely worth it.
I wanted to add to his resume too and say, because this is probably how a lot of people my age will know him, he wrote the character cards on the toys as well. And that was actually my first impression of his writing. And then later as a kid, like, I got the comics and stuff, but didn't realize how crazy they were till I read them as an adult. Are we ready for?
Yeah. Tell us about your next book.
Yeah. So this is my favorite one. It is Unico, The Awakening. And I will say I didn't know anything about it when I picked it up, other than it has a cute unicorn on it. And that is absolutely enough to sell me. And cute baby unicorn, I might add.
Yeah, like, it looks kind of like a My Little Pony character.
Not gonna lie, that's kind of what I thought it might be related to My Little Pony or something, of which, not afraid to admit this, I'm a big fan of My Little Pony.
You're a Pegasister.
I'm a Pegasister. Yeah. It's a good show. But it's just really good if you like cute things. Ponies that look like cats? Yeah, sign me up. Anyway, Unico is actually based on a manga that's fairly old. Like this particular manga came out in the 80s, even though just discovered the author of it is like huge in manga, kind of like the inventor of manga.
Yeah, the godfather of manga, they call him.
Yeah, Suzuko.
Osamu Tezuka. Might be killing the pronunciation, but yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you're probably doing better than me. But I fell in love with this book. I want to read the manga now. I want to see the anime. And when this comes out in August, I want to read every issue that comes out because I am obsessed. It is about this unicorn, baby unicorn, that gets banished by the goddess Venus because they're taking attention away from Venus, and she likes her attention. So she banishes this unicorn, gets one of her servants called Nightwind to take it to the Hill of Forgetfulness. But the Nightwind keeps letting Unico kind of live a life, and then taking Unico to the Hill of Forgetfulness, and then taking him back out, letting him live life, and then taking him back, which she realizes is actually really cruel. So she takes him like way far ahead in time in the future to like now, so that he can kind of hide there so Venus won't find him. And then once in modern times, we get into like this cat society. And these cats have like this guard system because a cat just was recently killed by a raccoon. So all of these cats are on guard, like on the little, what are those things outside of city apartments?
Fire escapes?
Yeah, outside on the fire escapes, doing their cat watch. And this cat sees Unico and leaves their station of duty to save him and gets in trouble with the other cats, but brings Unico back to her little place where she lives, her owner's apartment, and shows him what a heater is. They actually pronounce it heater with a D, which is really cute and animal-like. And it's just adorable. Like, I loved it enough. But once the little secret cat society got introduced and the cat like showing him around the house and stuff, oh my goodness, cute attack. I love it.
Yeah, and it was weird that book has like just a very coincidental connection with the graphic novel I picked out there. So the shop we were in, Daydream Comics, was very packed, which is pretty typical of any free comic book day. But like, it was hard to really browse the actual comics on the shelves that you pay for. But I just was squeezing past their one manga shelf when a book caught my eye. Princess Night, it was called. And I just read the back, and it seemed like something that was perfect for Transcending Comics. Which I've been looking for a good manga to cover there to just expand our comic selection. But yeah, this so far I'm really liking, and I didn't have any idea the historic impact of this book when I picked it out. So yeah, this is also by Osamu Tezuka, who is the creator of Astro Boy, as well as like a number of other huge foundational early manga. And as I've done just a little bit of like Wikipedia research, I found that this was like the first real narrative shoujo comic or like story comic to my understanding. I guess before that they'd been like little funny gags or like morality tales in a short comic. This was the first to like really string them together to tell a larger story. And it's also kind of the foundational text of a lot of magical girl media. Like, because it follows a kind of androgynous protagonist that's given the heart of both a boy and a girl when they're a little cherub baby up in heaven. And they're now born as a princess, but they have to live as a knight and a prince so they can inherit the kingdom someday, because there's some rule saying that only a male heir can wear the crown. And yeah, like the whole double life kind of transformation aspect has been huge and inspiring a lot of media, and like is sometimes even called the first like comic heroine or super heroine. And I think this is just really the perfect book for me to find right now. I've only read the first chapter, and I'm sure there's going to be problematic elements because this is a 1950s comic. It's literally might be the oldest comic I've ever read. But I'm really excited to cover this on Transcending Comics someday since, yeah, I don't think there's a better first manga I could have found. And it's all in one nice self-contained book, so I don't have to read a long series like Rama 1/2 and sift through a longer, probably problematic depiction of gender at play in a series. So I'm so excited to dig into this.
Yeah, we just started kind of like researching him today once we realized like, oh, we both have books by this guy, and wow, he's like the grandfather of manga. And yeah, found out all these things that he'd done that we were somewhat familiar with, like Astro Boy. Like I was like, oh, that's who did Astro Boy. Oh, okay, cool, because that I'm pretty familiar with.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not a real episode of one of my podcasts, or at least Transcending Comics, if I don't get a little into Tommy's spiritual woo-woo bullshit. But, like, I don't know, it was just really poetic to me that this was the book that called to me on the shelf when, right now I'm in a course that's specifically about narrative archetypes. It's being led by Arden Lee, who's kind of like the spiritual protege, or at least student of Grant Morrison. And yeah, her class has been really cool so far. And the archetype that I've been looking into is specifically like that, not of the magical girl, but kind of above that, of just like kind of the transforming Amazon female warrior type of thing. Like that's had elements in Wonder Woman and She-Ra and yeah, of course, like every magical girl anime. And I just don't think there was like, feels very coincidental that this would then be the book that I would find today of like the few I got to browse. And I think this is going to be a really important one for me to read while I'm looking into this archetype, since this might be one of the first real incarnations of that, at least the first in comic or manga form.
Yeah, I definitely want to check it out when you're done with it. It looks really cool.
Now, I think you've kind of answered the question at least about Unico, but of the series you've read today from the free comic day, which, if any, do you think like you would feel tempted to actually like follow the series properly, like month to month, or buying it as a graphic novel once it gets collected in a trade? Any real standouts for you?
Unico, 100%. Even though that's a little bit of a cheat of an answer, since the other three that I got were kind of rehashes of things I already really enjoyed. Like I'd already read some of those Asterix comics and had seen some of the Mad ones as well, because I was already a giant fan. But yeah, 100% Unico. I am such a fan right now.
Similar for me, like, I mean, the Energon book is the one that jumped out at me the most. And 2 of those books I'm already on the pull list for. But this really did sell me on buying the collected trades of G.I. Joe whenever that's released. Largely because I started to find how much of the story is told there. Like, that's where we find out what's happened to Megatron over all these years. And plus, like, I now have the newfound appreciation for G.I. Joe comics outside of this, and this seems to be no exception for how good and fun they can be. So I'm glad that this has helped sell me into, like, diving into this universe of toys and stories and comics that, like, kind of missed me growing up, but actually has enough appeal to draw me in as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts, Eri, before I wrap this up?
The only thing I was going to add, and this is a little bit late to the party, but I wanted to just add one more thing to Larry Hama's resume.
Sure.
Which has always impressed me and I always think this is super cool. He's an actual veteran. I believe he fought in Vietnam, and just really cool. I would have never have thought that the person that wrote the G.I. Joe stuff was an actual veteran. But now when I go back and reread it and everything, I notice all of these little things that I didn't necessarily need as a kid since I came from a military family. But there's like, he'll put like little glossary terms and notes at the bottom or whatever to kind of translate a lot of military speak for you, which I was really impressed by. So just fascinating individual, awesome history, and really good. If you want to just go down a fun like research rabbit hole, just kind of wiki Larry Hama. He's an amazing person.
Yeah, and I suppose last notes for me as well. One thing that I think a lot of people don't know when they go into Free Comic Book Day is that the comic shops usually have to actually buy all of these comics from whatever publisher. I mean, they're usually pretty cheap compared to standard comics, like maybe 50 cents or less. I don't know the exact price, but that's why at a lot of them, you'll see a limit of like 3 or 4 comics that you can take. Others are generous and let you take as many as you want. But with that said, like, I mean, we just kind of popped into the comic shop because we were downtown anyway. But if you go to a shop and pick these up, I do really recommend that you buy at least something from the store to kind of show your support. I knew I wanted to get something while I was there, and thankfully Princess Knight stood out to me right before we left. But also Daydream Comics, I've got to shout them out because they also had a stand that would let you buy most in-demand graphic novels for a local bookmobile service. So if there was nothing you wanted particularly, you could still buy a book for a good cause. And this is the most stressful day for most comic book stores in the country. A lot of them need to get volunteers brought in. A lot of them pull out all the stops, and they also have to rework their stores to jam a lot of people into what usually is not a very big space. So, like, please be really cool to the staff, be cool to their inventory, and try and buy something or show your support for your local comic shop because they're pretty much universally locally owned. So show some appreciation to your local comic book store, wherever that may be. Now, wrapping up today's show, thankfully the very talented Ray Day Parade does the logos for both my shows, so shout out to them for doing just such a great job on both. Intro and outro music this week is going to be A Little Soul and You've Been Starring by Carlson. He's got a new album coming out this year, so do keep an eye on his social medias or just keep track of carlson.com. I'm really excited to hear what he has in store. Otherwise, we hope you'll check us out again during our next episode. I swear it'll be a bit more formal. But until then, keep reading, keep writing, and keep transcending. For a second, I thought it wasn't recording and I was gonna fucking die.